even more claustrophobic. But thankfully, we got those, and we'll see how things play out. As we start off here in the top left-hand side of the map, top of the blue Terran player, he is Kelazhu. Archangel Gaming.
In the bottom right on Team Exxon, he is SpeCial.
Do you think in the year 2030 we're gonna have a live band that actually plays those little segments for the intros on the fly?
Well, as you know, Fear Dragon, esports has a good reputation for bringing in music, live music, to esports events.
There have been a few events where we've had live orchestras. Just saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Dota, right?
Also, the Iron Squid event, right?
I didn't think that they actually had it live orchestra there. I thought it was just that a live orchestra did music for it. I don't actually remember. Yeah, that was just before I really got into StarCraft esports. I actually got into StarCraft esports in 2011, but I was very much so a YouTube watcher, you know, like HDSD Husky, as well as like all Korean stuff too. Big fangirl.
I love how much of a Brood War fangirl you are, even though you weren't from the Brood War era. Like, I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean that very earnestly. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, I appreciate all the people who are like, you should really play this better game that existed when I got into StarCraft 2.
Speaking of Brood War, I mean, SpeCial is one of those players that has been around since the Brood War era. He's seriously one of the old school players, and it's actually kind of evident because I think SpeCial's even played a little bit of Brood War, like Artosis or something. I know I've seen him play it recently.
He played
really
against Tasteless.
Oh, you know, I thought that was Cats that played versus Tasteless, but maybe it was both of them.
He also did, yeah. I'm pretty sure SpeCial, they sniped him on ladder, is the thing. They're like, is this really special? And then, yeah, it was really special. So yeah, he's I think he's actually asked for like a show match occasionally, so he's still very good at Brood War. He's obviously very good in StarCraft 2. And he is going to be applying maybe a bit more of that pressure. He was the one that went for a double refinery.
Oh.
Okay, well that's that well.
Hey, look, you know, SpeCial's good at StarCraft, but Kelazhu used to be the North American version of Euthermal and Beyond when it comes to the Reaper control, okay? And I still feel like I see little spitterings and spatterings of it with his Reapers every so often.
You know what's funny? I was going to talk about SpeCial being in Korea, and then I remembered that Kelazhu is in the Netherlands.
I know, they're actually playing Europe versus Korea in a Latin American tournament.
Yes, yeah, that is a little bizarre. But without that second Reaper, like, you're really probably not going to do very much. Plus, a bunker was already done, so SpeCial isn't really doing anything with his opener except just feeling very safe. It does mean that he's going to be behind on the orbital, so it usually is like 2 SCVs. Not something that's a big deal. And one of the reasons I ended up agreeing with Wardy when he was like, you know, I think this is a matchup that, you know, kind of anything can happen, is that the comeback potential for me is so great. You know, yeah, absolutely, the first 5 minutes can be volatile, but I think after that it's just more like, well, maybe it was, but then tanks are good and you hold on to your third base, and it's actually kind of even again.
Okay, yeah. So we do have the Reaper for Kelazhu actually getting pretty far in, getting a good scout out, and actually does see that, hey, like, your tech lab is a bit faster than mine. You got a Cyclone out well before me, and even though our first siege tanks are going to be set up at the same time, it is going to be about, it looks like, the Liberator also coming out over there for SpeCial, seeing how much it can do.
You usually want to, you know, pair this up with something else happening. There's not much he can really do that with. Maybe the Cyclone locks onto the bunker, I suppose. But Kelazhu's been playing a fairly safe game. He was the one that chose to go for the faster command center. This Raven is also going to set him up well for defense and offense. I think one of the scary things about a map this size is that tank Raven push just gets there so much faster, so you like kind of like lose track of you know, the timing that it can hit, and it's going to be a very scary thing. But SpeCial is actually just taking his ragtag group of units, this is not a push you would usually see, and bringing them forward, anchored by like basically a single tank. I'm not sure how long it'll last, but it might distract the Liberator to do some damage.
Well, Raven throws down the auto to try and help deal with the Liberator at the same time. The SpeCial's trying to push him forward, and I like the lock-on with the Cyclone to knock out that bunker. Repair is coming out, and eventually that Cyclone lock-on will expire, but didn't actually pull enough of those workers to keep that bunker alive, so now it's gonna go down. But Kelazhu with a second siege tank should be well set up, right?
I mean, I guess so, but SpeCial can really reinforce very quickly. A second tank's already here, and he's actually setting up for, this push. That with the Vikings, with 2 tanks, 2 Vikings, he'd be like, yeah, you could push with that. But it started a little bit sooner. It might have surprised Kelazhu as well. He's taking on a Liberator pretty much no problem, but still has to worry about positioning of these units. He has to worry about the air advantage with the Vikings moving forward.
And that's brutal. Going to be losing the reactor on that barracks, and might even end up losing a supply depot or 2 over here. Not something that Kelazhu really wants to have to worry about right now. Sets up a siege tank on the other side of the barracks, but it's just barely not in range to do a whole lot. And even if it was, well, he probably would have lost the siege tank trying to get it set up there.
Does Kelazhu have anything else really going for him? The building number of Ravens is going up to 3. Could eventually bust the tanks, but the bunker being there might be something that the Ravens have trouble with. I think he's going to go with all auto turrets. And is SpeCial respecting him or just repositioning? Just repositioning.
I think the siege tanks for Kelazhu are in range of the bunker, though, so that is going to be able to potentially shut that down. We can keep those siege tanks alive. They're so low on hit points, and the Vikings managing to push back one of the Ravens there and actually getting the kill.
Yeah, that's actually really bad. I'm not sure what Kelazhu's Raven was doing. Maybe he was thinking about slapping out an auto turret, but then the micro can get kind of odd because the range of the auto turret's really, really low.
Oh.
Well, that one is just sniped. This other one's going to go down as well. No mass repair, no auto turret. 3 Ravens doing nothing.
And now we're at the point where the Viking count is also high enough that if the Marines are all sitting on the low ground trying to protect the natural, the Vikings could very well land and actually do some more damage to both the mineral line or even just landing on top of the siege tanks. This is getting really, really dangerous for Kelazhu.
Everything is going poorly for Kelazhu, to be honest. The only thing he has is slightly more workers, but SpeCial is getting his 3rd on location. SpeCial also has faster stim, which would be faster combat shields. He still has the air superiority. Those 3 Ravens didn't work out at all, so he brings forward a Liberator. And this is one of those pushes that actually starts and it doesn't seem like a big deal, that actually ends up ending the game.
Yeah, I feel like we are starting to drift to that point. It looks like Kelazhu is going to catch SpeCial somewhat on siege, but there is stim, and SpeCial annihilates a lot of the front line there for Kelazhu without really losing a whole lot in exchange. The 2 Liberators here are, 1 Liberator was enough. 2 Liberators going to cause a GG.
Very uncomfortable map. I don't think Kelazhu was quite prepared for such a fast attack and then being able to reinforce it like that. I mean... I don't want to blame the map entirely, but I'm sure it played a part as to why SpeCial did the push in the first place, or maybe Kelazhu should have played a little more to that. It really does suck that 3 Ravens couldn't do anything. If 3 Ravens are out and they slap down like 7 auto turrets or something insane, that has an insane amount of DPS. Don't sleep on Ravens. They just look really bad in that game.
Yeah, really nice decision from SpeCial. Just continue investing into those Vikings in response and just build up such a critical mass that not only could he push back the Ravens from doing anything, but also getting up the Liberators in a good position. Really worked out pretty gosh darn well. But we get ready to move into map number 2. SpeCial looked pretty strong in that first game. And it reminds me now that all these little things about TVT and maybe even just the experience of how many games you've played TVT on the new maps and everything, it reminds me Europe is not really necessarily as well known for having a ton of Terran players on the ladder. I mean, you were kind of talking, it's a lot of Zerg players and even like the Protoss players in the mid levels. Korea is really well known for having a ton of Terran players, and that's where SpeCial is. Kelazhu is over in Europe.
Yeah, we didn't really get to touch on that in the briefing beforehand, but absolutely, like, not only is it well known for TVT over in Korea, but SpeCial is well known to be a practice partner of some of the best TVTers, a protege of TY, if you will. Like, there's definitely a reason why people would expect SpeCial to 3-0 here, and it wouldn't be a surprising result if Kelazhu really does look lost in the matchup. I just would have been surprised if he looked lost. I do think he didn't choose a fantastic build for the map they first played on, but once we have the correct players in game, we'll go on to Eternal Empire, where I think we'll see more of what Kelazhu can offer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel as though Kelazhu is one of those players that I think when the game gets scrappy and it's a lot of like back and forth, that's where I feel like Kelazhu can really hit his stride. When it's just someone situates himself outside of Kelazhu's base and Kelazhu is on the defensive the entirety of the game, that is where I think actually Kelazhu is sometimes at his worst. That's where he does look a lot sillier, and he isn't really tapping into a lot of his strengths.
I agree. I remember in Challenger back when he was still well, actually, he might not have been a full-time player, but he was kind of like, he was very recently retired, quote unquote. I remember like talking about that. Very common pushes in the early game with those tanks and Vikings or Ravens, either one. And I was like, well, you kind of have to get ahead of it. And I think Kelazhu would know this. I think Kelazhu like did, but then miscalculated and pulled back. And then it was just the exact same scenario where he was clearly uncomfortable, really didn't feel in the zone. And we even saw a lot of mechanical slip-ups, late barracks, bad use of his minerals. So I agree with you. If he's more in control, I think he does better. Another reason why I didn't really like his build on that map.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, we are going to a more standard map from the past, and it's going to be Eternal Empire, something I assure you both these players have played thousands of times at this point. So I think Kelazhu should probably have a better handle on that. I think this map is also, it's got a little bit more space in that main base, a little bit more space between like where your opponent would siege you up and your natural expansion ramp where your add-ons and stuff would be. So probably not going to be quite the same kind of game.
I don't think so. Here we are, finally ready with the right players in the top rights for Team Exxon. He is SpeCial.
And in the bottom left, we have the blue Terran player from Team Archangel Gaming. It is Kelazhu.
You know what's so funny about this is that I recently cast this tournament where it was on old maps and ended up being a TVT finals, Future and Masa, right? And one of them was quite Masa's an older player than Future, like literally, and as well as how many years they've been playing StarCraft.
Yes.
And he was like, "Man, Vikings make you feel safe, but it's a lie." I think were like Future's exact words. He kept losing whenever he would try. So it's funny that SpeCial, uses Vikings and obviously used them very aggressively. It wasn't defensive at all, but it was kind of amazing to see how well it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of get it, as we do actually see a bit of a difference in the openings, and something very important worth noting from Kelazhu, the 2 racks. But yeah, I kind of get it as someone who's not necessarily a Terran player and doesn't get to experience it firsthand. I can imagine it where vision, I'd almost put it as like vision and having like that control of the air where you can freely move units around must feel very good, even when it doesn't necessarily mean that your army is stronger.
Yeah, that's usually what
actually,
it means.
I equate it to actually in some ways being similar to like how Protoss players, I feel like there's this weird phase that some Protoss players go through where they're like, if I just have lots of observers, then I know where you always are. And it feels empowering to have that vision. But then you realize you don't actually have units to, it's like, I know exactly where you're coming from. I can't do anything about it, but I know where you're coming from.
Oh, you're exactly right. That is often what Vikings feel like. You'll be like, wow, this is so brutal. And then realize like a simple SEV pool with 6 units actually beats it. So yeah, you're quite right about that. It also just like, you have to really anticipate some of the more brutal spots on maps as a Terran player. Against a Terran player, right? So that didn't necessarily happen on Submarine, but Eternal Empire, as you said, thousands of games played on this map, and Kelazhu knows exactly what he wants to do here. Unfortunately, the micro doesn't go as well for him, and he does not take control of the early game. But SpeCial had also scouted that it was in fact 2 racks, so he wasn't playing super greedy, nothing like going right into Reactor.
Yeah, nice focus fire there from SpeCial. Actually hits the back Reaper for Kelazhu and actually softens it up. But, oh, the Reapers sneak back in and managed to get some damage onto the SCV. Oh, nearly got the cancel, but if he had stuck around a little too long, he would end up losing a Reaper. So backs off. We'll just settle for some denied mining time with a 3 Reapers versus 2. Or will he?
Kelazhu should really do this. Yeah, that was a little over-eager. As just the amount of damage done before the Reapers can shoot back is kind of brutal. If you get 3 grenades down, then it can change. So I'm sure Kelazhu's been in that position before. That was not in his favor. SpeCial also figuring that most 2 racks openers, when they're not proxied, it is just 3 Reapers. So he's going to get even a little bit aggressive despite going for the greedier opener. There are enough Marines back at home that Kelazhu won't take any damage, but trying to chase on the 1 Reaper was a good idea. It didn't quite work. We'll come back to try and get some 1 or 2 SCVs.
Well, Hellion pokes on forward, softens up some of these Marines. Yeah, like you were saying, that Reaper does start to poke back over, trying to look for an opportunity, but SpeCial has that Hellion on patrol. And now SpeCial is going to actually return the favor and gets the SCV kills himself with both of his Reapers still alive, managing that 2, possibly 3. I mean, may even be able to get a 3rd, or sorry, a 4th SCV here.
I think so. There you go. Gets the 4th one. Finally, the Marines make it up top. That was the weakness that SpeCial was trying to abuse. The Marines were slow. At least SpeCial loses 2 SCVs as well. Kelazhu should feel a bit better about that. Overall, though, Kelazhu down 3 workers. He should be getting faster stim, especially because SpeCial is taking time to go into Banshees. He might be kind of even figuring that he's deterred Kelazhu from going into a Raven, or simply that it's not a very common follow-up to the 2 racks. There's different ways you can follow up for sure, but in this case, it's not happening. So I don't know, SpeCial is like, doing that god tier TVT thing, or just coincidentally finding himself against someone with no detection, but he's actually going Cloaked Banshee, not common in TVT.
Oh, Zombie Grub, this is actually not looking so hot right now. Kelazhu is also just at the point where he got enough energy on his natural to throw down a mule. And his main orbital, sitting at 53 energy. Banshee has been revealed. Okay, he's not yet used that energy, so has a Viking out, but I mean, with some really good control. SpeCial. Oh, he doesn't actually have Cloak just yet.
Okay.
Okay. There's a scan, and the Banshee is low enough that it will just go down to that single scan. I was going to say, could have been a dangerous scenario where if that scan does not catch and kill the Banshee, you suddenly actually don't have a whole lot of answers to the continued Banshee harass.
Unfortunately, the Cyclone, which also really helped shut down Banshees, was not in position. This time it will be, as long as he has another scan, which he doesn't quite. So that is very, very awkward. 12 more seconds. Going to go right after the Cyclone. A very bold move, but it's going to work out. The mass repair is not quite good enough. Behind this, SpeCial is going into mech. He's going into Banshee speed mech. Kelazhu is going to be in a world of hurt harassment-wise. And if he doesn't scout that his opponent is doing mech, he'll just be totally set up wrong.
Oh, this is just becoming a sort of demoralizing situation here for Kelazhu, because not only has the early game not really worked out, the 3 racks kind of ended up just leaving him taking more damage when he was supposed to have more units. And then even the follow-up, the Banshees do a lot of damage. It just, Kelazhu is falling further and further behind. And this is finally, after the 3 racks didn't work out, his final bit of pressure to try and do something. And SpeCial actually looks like he's just in position for this.
That scan should reveal, it sees the tech lab still moving, so I think it did just reveal that it's Speed Banshee and that it is probably mech. If not, the double drops in the main will. Banshees are available, but there's a lot of Marines in there. They don't quite have combat shields, and that tank Hellion combination with the Banshees will be way too much DPS. Kelazhu's trying to make something work. This is one of the most atrocious starts up against mech.
Well, Kelazhu realizes he cannot escape through the left-hand side, so he ends up darting down into the bottom right, and looks like he will find an escape path and potentially an area you can just drop in the natural and put some harassment on, but yeah, has really not been finding quite the damage he's looking for. In fact, losing more Marines than he ends up actually killing SCVs. This delays 2 supply depots, but at the end of the day, Kelazhu kind of retreats with his head held low.
Yeah, sort of a, sad puppy dog look. This is a pretty brutal opener. I mean, I think already facing mech is a little bit difficult to do, because especially if you scout it late, but then on top of it, you're already behind. I do like what Kelazhu is doing, though. With SpeCial going for the Speed Banshee, sure, it opens up an opportunity to do some more harassment than usual, but it doesn't get him the Vikings like mech usually would. Usually mech absolutely adds on Vikings or a Raven or 2. So he's trying to get to the Viking air superiority. It's going to help tear down these Banshees as they go towards the main, but it might also be his plan is to breaking the 3rd base. It's just so difficult to do, like look at his production right now. It's really nothing. And it's because his economy has been shut down. His 3rd CC is so late.
Well, Santa Grove, if he loses some add-ons to the Banshees, it might become less than nothing, but looks like only 1 Banshee going to get picked off by that scan. Viking's going to be on the hunt. SpeCial might actually be able to dart around them. Does Kelazhu even have another scan available?
I don't think that he does. It's not really worth it to go into a Raven, though, unfortunately. Like, yeah, just, oh, man. What a tough position. What a tough spot for Kelazhu. It's also very much so not the game that he would be able to come back in. I think if it's Marine tank versus Marine tank, I am a big believer in comebacks. But when you're behind against a mech player who easily secures a 3rd base, comebacks only happen when you surprise them with Mass Viking Liberator. I'm pretty sure SpeCial won't be surprised by that.
Yeah, I feel like this is just getting to the point where we start talking about the brutal nature of StarCraft sometimes, where it is a game that sometimes is all about snowballs, where the worse you do in the earlier stages of the game, the fewer options you have to even mount an attempt at coming back in the game. And I feel like this is starting to get into that area where Kelazhu is sitting. Kelazhu does still have a few tools under his belt. He was trying to use those medevacs with not exactly the greatest degree of effectiveness, but he was attempting to find some little bits and pieces of damage. And he does still have a decent number of Vikings. He has that Viking count lead, so maybe he can make some magic happen there now, but it's really going to rely on some good positioning.
Okay. I do like that Kelazhu is just trying to take as little damage as possible. He knows he can't really push into SpeCial, so he's just going to keep his Vikings split to deal with the Banshees. But the thing is, SpeCial is not a player who would just sit back and be like, I'm too scared to move out. SpeCial knows exactly how far ahead he is. He's going to be the one to push. And without Kelazhu's army being out in the map trying to stop this, he's going to get obliterated in his own choke. Viking advantage or not, SpeCial's already accommodated for it by building his own Vikings and even sending over a couple of Thors.
I mean, I know that Kelazhu can't really afford to make one right now, but a sensor tower would do wonders for him, just being able to reposition between the natural and the third. Because right now he has so much army set up over by the third base that is not going to be here to help push back this army that moves through the choke point. Kelazhu stims, tries to set himself up. He's already lost a handful of the siege tanks over here, and the Vikings for SpeCial seem like they are actually winning out in the day.
Yeah, there's a little bit of awkwardness as Kelazhu maybe had initially more Vikings, but they weren't all together because they're split up to deal with the Banshees. The ultra defensive stance, I mean, it worked, but he didn't account for SpeCial moving out, I guess even before he was maxed. And that's unfortunate. It looks like SpeCial's not going to try his luck. And we'll pull back. Kelazhu's really trying to get to that air superiority. He's building Vikings, building a second starport, a fusion core. And I think he's doing this off of, I mean, he can't even really build to all of his barracks and do that as well, but he's trying. It's a good attempt to find the fourth base, but with the mass repair with the Hellions, Planetary will finish.
Yeah, and the unfortunate part as the TV in a TVP is that once that Planetary does finish up, a handful of Marines and a medevac are never going to really be able to do a whole lot to that Planetary anymore. So drop does get cleaned up. SpeCial is poaching around for a fourth base, sees that's not on the low ground, goes up to the high ground, and is going to find easy pickings here, and not even something that Kelazhu can cancel.
Nope, he just restarts his fourth base in other places. He's kind of, it's funny, we have the bio player being the turtle player versus the mech player moving around. And SpeCial definitely has enough back at home to make sure he doesn't die to any run-bys, especially because Kelazhu isn't maxed out, and he's also not getting anywhere close to maxed out on bio. So run-bys really shouldn't be a problem. He deals with just a few tanks here.
Yeah, and I do think that there is one way that I start to see that, hey, SpeCial's now maxed out. If Kelazhu is not trading, or, SpeCial is not trading out some of that maxed out supply, then Kelazhu can start mounting up a larger and larger army supply, but you can see that that is, in fact, just not happening. SpeCial is demolishing that army of Kelazhu. Kelazhu still has to somehow mount up a defense while also expanding, and I think it's going to be tough for him to do both.
It's only 9 Vikings to 8. Like, it's not that much of an air superior game for Kelazhu. He is trying to get to, Liberators with range to help tackle these Thors, but it's not done yet, actually. So the Thors can easily focus fire the Liberators, and there is the tap out.
Well played by SpeCial. 2-0 lead in this best of 5. Just needs one more game to close this out yet again and extend that winning streak. So is this the moment that SpeCial finally suffers a defeat here from Kelazhu as we go into game number 3? Or is this going to just be a 3-0? Zombie Grub, any changes in your predictions?
I'm kind of feeling the 3-0 right now. I was really hoping for a Kelazhu that was going to bring the heat, bring the aggression, and instead we've seen just the Tyrax opener, which really usually does just end at 3 Reapers and doesn't get very much, and in that game didn't get anything. So it's not the Kelazhu that I was hoping to see, It's him macroing against a guy who's macroed his way into the round of 16 of GSL. So it's like, just hoping for some more kerfuffle.
Yeah, actually, sort of the builds and, like, for example, game number 1, the style that SpeCial went for is kind of the stuff that I was expecting to see from Kelazhu. He's usually been the sort of more in-your-face kind of player. Especially, I think his TBT got really, really good and was actually good enough to beat players or take maps off of players like SpeCial or, defeating players like Masa and all this other stuff, around the time where TBT was very, very centric around that 1-1-1 setup, pushing across the map and doing that really early 2-base push with like 1, maybe 2 Ravens. I feel like that's when when Kelazhu was really strong. And it's just, it's surprising for me to see Kelazhu play so defensive.
Yeah, again, that 2 racks opener kind of as an aside. It's a way to open to try and gain some momentum, but even if it does, it's usually not a whole lot. And otherwise, he'd just try and macro out of it. But, well, we can't put all the blame on Kelazhu for choosing things that we didn't think he would choose. SpeCial is also mixing it up. The mech game in game number 2, also with Banshee speed, was supposed to be a surprise. And while it didn't do devastating amounts of damage, it did enough damage to certainly put SpeCial very far ahead.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to be starting down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, top of the blue Terran player. He is Kelazhu from Archangel Gaming.
In the top left, there's the red Terran for Team Exxon. He is SpeCial.
One of my favorite things about Kelazhu is like he's kind of like a world traveler. Actually, he has lived on more continents than I think most people can have said they've visited. He was actually born in the United States in Florida. Lived most of his early childhood and everything up until I want to say 2015 or so in Brazil. So was living in South America and everything. Then moved over back to North America to live in the Root House for a bit. Then stayed in Korea for, I think, almost close to a year over in the kind of foreigner team house. And then moved back to the United States before he went to school in Europe. So he's basically lived on 4 different continents. Yeah. Pretty impressive.
He also spent a lot of time in China at one point.
That's true. Yeah, he did live in China in one of the team houses for a little bit. So actually, yeah, that's 5 continents. The only ones he's missing are Africa and Antarctica. And I feel like one of those is forgivable to not live in. Antarctica, maybe not the best place. I feel like you might have some latency issues there.
You might have some problems finding a server.
Blizzard, Antarctica server when, please?
If there was a stronger StarCraft 2 esports scene, especially that just generally esports in Africa, I could see him living in South Africa. But,
do you think what company would be the first company to get a Antarctica server?
Something that was really casual. I feel like Minecraft, they write to what is it, Mojang or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, dear Minecraft people, it's really boring and cold here. Please give us a game that we can just dive 100 hours into.
That's also fair because you can set up a Minecraft server. Anyone can set up one. So I think that's actually a good guess. Yeah.
Nice. I nailed it.
Got him. So how are the opening shaping up so far? I mean, we have mirrored units on both sides. Kelazhu's the one getting a bit more aggressive.
Well, that's what we wanted to see, right? It does look like it's very similar. Starport's a little faster for Kelazhu, so there was a bit of a difference. Both adding tech labs. I wonder if this will be any attempt at another Banshee build. The thing is that, Banshees are okay. They're good in other matchups, and they're just kind of okay in TBT. It's the reason why they're not anticipated, especially not with speed like last game. I don't know if you do it 2 times in a row, and I don't know if you do it with Kelazhu. He's got to be a little careful here. There's one more Hellion for his opponent as he moved on to the tech lab on the factory faster than SpeCial did, which gives him maybe some more Marines, but they're not numbers high enough to help against the Reaper grenades yet.
Another SCV going to get taken out over here. I mean, there's one more SCV that I think is building the refinery, so I guess you could try and finish up that command center, but a Cyclone pops out, that's usually the kill signal for the attack, so SpeCial's going to go ahead and back off, but already feeling good. Killing 3 workers there.
Yeah. Kelazhu's very fast third gas, I feel, should be leading him into his own Raven. SpeCial gets his third gas a little bit slower, but still kind of fast. Yeah, both going into Raven builds. This might be a setup for one of our longer games that's, a more even longer game, I should say. Eternal Empire was a decent amount of time, but it's kind of one-sided.
All right. The Ravens, starting to come on out. When you go for this kind of style as Kelazhu is doing, do you usually go for like the multiple ravens, or is two, three ravens? Is there a standard for that?
I know you. I feel like I'm hearing I was talking to you earlier about TVT in general, and it's like, there are definitely builds that intend to use 3 ravens aggressively. I would say that 3 raven pushes are usually like you get 3 ravens, you do a push. But I would say otherwise, not necessarily. It does feel a little bit just like what the ideas of the players, like in their head, what they think they're going to do with it. So in this case, not only do we have a raven opener, we also had that cyclone upgrade on, right? So as soon as you ask me, like, what do you do here? I'm like, well, I've never done this. I personally don't like that cyclone upgrade, but it is going to be going into mech for Kelazhu, so he's really changing things up. SpeCial doing what I would expect, which is, go into at least 2 ravens is usually what it is, if not 3. Kelazhu not only going for the cyclone upgrades, also going for banshees, which SpeCial should be able to tell with that scan. You don't see those 2 researching anything else, really.
All right. Yeah, well, pretty obvious what the factory is definitely going to be researching at a minimum, and not a whole lot else to do on that tech lab for the starport. Kelazhu is doing his big move out over here as he establishes a 3rd base behind it. SpeCial is already also situating himself outside of his own 3rd base and getting ready to intercept.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Kelazhu goes for 1 raven. SpeCial goes for double raven production. This is very different than what you would expect. I saw that 2nd starport, and I thought maybe it would be like a little bit of a banshee meme. Nah, it's ravens. So I'll talk more about that in a second. We do have a very odd push from Kelazhu.
Oh, the lock.
Raven auto turret's very scary, though, so Cyclone should respect that.
Oh man, and the Hellions just roasting and toasting these Marines in the corner. There's nowhere to run. Now, a lot of the Hellions do get picked off over here, but I mean, Kelazhu's push has also been heavily thwarted in terms of Marine count. Are the Cyclones going to be enough to deal with the reinforcements? Looks like it's enough to get 3rd.
He got the 3rd, and he got 8 SCVs. There was a Banshee in the natural that did some pretty darn good damage. SpeCial actually losing on both fronts. Down workers, down command center, and he's totally surprised, I would guess, from this decision. Like, he scouted it, sure, but the way that Kelazhu has used it, he's probably like, wait, what? Like, why would you push and do this exact thing?
Okay, well, when you have 4 ravens, there's one thing you don't need to do, and that's scan for banshees.
Very true.
There's going to be the cleanup. Nice lock on with the Cyclone, so finally getting a little bit of counter damage done, but still going to be, a kind of frustrating situation here for SpeCial. It's such a late 3rd base.
I don't know if SpeCial is styling on Kelazhu, but I love that this was probably the way that neither one of them anticipated things to happen. Like, SpeCial might be trying to use a couple of there are some abusive Raven situations against a building Terran player. If they're on 50 Marines and 5 tanks and 10 medevacs, I don't know if Master Raven is really going to cut it. But as a building Terran player, pre-8 minutes, pre-9 minutes, there's things that Ravens can do. But I'm not sure that SpeCial was expecting him to be going into Cyclone mech until he scanned, and, well, it may be too late to change his mind. Mass Ravens do come in here with auto turrets, though, and the Cyclones don't get too many great lock-ons. Leads to a loss of 4 SCVs, but more should go down in the main.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, a lot of those auto turrets are so far back, they didn't really end up attacking many of the Cyclones. So Kelazhu keeps a large chunk of his army alive, even though he does end up losing 7 workers, which evens things up on that count. And hey, SpeCial also escapes out of there with all the Ravens. I actually thought he was going to maybe do more damage to the army, but this is still pretty good.
This is so funny. I feel like I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, the Cyclones should be better, right?
Yeah, and they are starting to be better now.
Okay, yeah.
Ravens die.
Yeah, I don't think SpeCial was anticipating this, so he did build up the Ravens, but then he was like, you know what, I'm not sure this is going to work. So now he's using his starports to build into Vikings, which I think does make more sense. They're both going mech. The thing is that for Kelazhu, if he didn't have to just deal with a minute and a half of harassment from the Ravens, he's probably jumping on top of SpeCial's 4th base, jumping on top of his 3rd, catching him with a very limited number of tanks. I mean, look at SpeCial's army right now that aren't the Ravens. Kelazhu is spending so much time clearing up the Ravens that he's not taking the opportunity to kill SpeCial, basically.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. There is a very paltry army there for SpeCial right now. And Kelazhu seems like he has enough to actually deal with that. And the funny thing about Cyclones is that they do great in the earlier stages of the game, but just once your opponent gets up 3 or 4 siege tanks, it feels like Cyclones don't exist anymore. They disappear before your very eyes.
Oh, it's what happens, but there is a balancing act. You know, especially if you're also talking about a concave and not a choke of Cyclones. So SpeCial's still at that point where he doesn't have enough tanks to feel super comfortable if he's not on the high ground, he's not in a choke. But as long as he has the defensive properties of Death Aura on his side, I guess he'll live. But it makes a lot of sense that Kelazhu was able to deny that 4th base. If he hadn't denied that with the current setup, I feel heartbroken for him, basically. Like, he's supposed to stop that 4th base from coming down that fast.
Yeah, 2 more tanks are about to pop out over here for SpeCial, so I think that should be enough for him to cover his different angles and possibly establish that 4th base finally. But I like this from SpeCial. He's going to be able to get this Hellion run by over to the 4th base of Kelazhu, and Kelazhu doesn't really have any units nearby. A single Marine and a single Viking, I'm not sure that's going to be quite enough to clean this up before taking some pretty substantial SCV losses.
Never underestimate a landed Viking, Fear Dragon.
As a Protoss player with Stalkers, yes, that will never happen again.
Kelazhu's actually been sharking around quite a bit. Uh-oh, he's not paying attention. Oh, I don't know really what's happening there.
So about these tanks versus Cyclones, Zombie Grub.
It actually looked like he was paying attention. I think maybe he didn't think it was 2 tanks?
Yeah, I think he underestimated how many tanks, and he thought he could get the lock-on with the Cyclone onto the tank and, like, kill it off before another couple of hits landed. Because, I mean, that's the thing, right, is that if you kill the siege tank before that last shot goes off, you have 4 more Cyclones alive. But if that last shot goes off, you lose 4 Cyclones. It's all or nothing, hit or miss.
Yeah, it's brutal. Well, I think that marks the end of the Cyclone era. I really do. I think Kelazhu, by building more Cyclones...
For players everywhere. Not just Kelazhu.
Yeah. Or if he's going to continue building Cyclones... I just don't see, like, Death Aura is really, like, starting to appeal to me as a mech map, the way that SpeCial is using it. The only fear really was that low number of tanks 3 minutes ago, but now that he has a good number of tanks, yeah, I think Kelazhu is going to have to also change up his composition a little bit to at least add a few tanks, you know? If we're going to go into Mech Wars Cyclone tank versus Cyclone tank, then fair enough that he also continues building Cyclones, but I think you need a couple of tanks in there.
Yeah,
I like SpeCial setup better.
I'm definitely in agreement with that. I've been thinking, like, okay, work accounts are really high for both of these players, and I understand Kelazhu having a really high work account. I mean, this is his army. It's a big battle mech army, and he's kind of got to out-expand the player who's just massing up a lot of siege tanks. I'm sort of surprised to see SpeCial have 90 workers. Oh, boy.
Oh, geez.
And that's why you need a lot of workers, Zombie Grub, to remake those units.
You're not wrong. Kelazhu's style, usually you do aggressively expand even, and you have like a really high worker count because you can usually get away with it because you're controlling the map. But yeah, I guess I'm a little surprised about SpeCials too. I guess you got a very fast 4th base. So this is one of those scenarios where you can use these 90 SCVs for a little while longer than you would expect. SpeCial has not been going into any upgrades, but keep in mind that the Cyclone upgrade doesn't benefit from +1. I know we talked about that last time we saw SpeCial in TVT, but I just think that in general, having the tanks, no upgrades, yes, upgrades, doesn't matter. Having the tanks makes SpeCial army better, unless Kelazhu can constantly catch them on siege, which he tried and eventually failed at doing.
Yeah, the Hellion run by also does not really end up doing a whole lot over there. And SpeCial's getting more damage on the other side of the map. Zombie Grub, when you have a battle mech army that is supposed to be just trading not necessarily more efficiently, but you're supposed to be able to remake it quicker, you're usually supposed to be up a bit in supply. SpeCial is now up almost 50, 60 supply, and I'm getting really worried for Kelazhu because he's also lost so much ground. SpeCial also, like, by adding in his own Cyclones, doesn't just give his army a bit more mobility, something to cover the tanks while they stage hop forward. He's also taking care of any tricky things that Kelazhu have done with those Liberators, which is, he just tried and they just got bopped by the Cyclones. So now SpeCial, thinking that he has control over the game, is going to add on his own Liberators. He's totally in the right to do so. It'll probably be the finale here. Liberators swooping in to kill all of Kelazhu's units. He's barely going to hold for now, but there's a lot more coming from SpeCial. Yeah, Kelazhu with a couple of those Liberators might be able to buy a bit of time, but this is just the gradual chokehold taking effect. And even with that bottom left-hand base that Kelazhu is trying to take right now, there's always an opportunity for SpeCial to, okay, we'll probably not move single file up a very narrow ramp like that. But I was going to say, send some of these Hellions over to this base or even to the bottom left. But with a Cyclone lock-on onto that orbital, oh my god, he might actually be able to get it. No, it's barely repaired up in time.
Oh my god. Cyclone damage is so cool.
Cyclone damage scares me whenever I see it on a command center. It just does damage so quickly.
I mean, kudos to Kelazhu for keeping a level head. He's barely held on here, held on to that third base. He's expanding to a fifth and trying to keep tabs on the tanks, which aren't leapfrogging so much anymore. They are just kind of all moving at the same time. So he's trying to catch them with the Cyclones. Kelazhu's army supply really isn't that bad. He noted when it was down like 40. It's only down 10 now, and he's trying to get a surround on SpeCial's army.
Okay, Kelazhu did just end up losing all of his forward siege tanks, but that Liberator is doing quite a bit. Cyclones really need to get a lock on from SpeCial to try and take care of that Liberator, but looks like Kelazhu starts committing a little bit too far, takes a big siege tank shot to the face, and that Liberator is finally going to end up falling. Just 3 siege tanks really to fall back to.
It's kind of amazing watching them dance. The tanks guarding the Cyclones that are guarding the tanks against the Liberators. The Liberator's mostly just suiciding.
It's a really fun style, and I've got to say, in some ways, like it's a bit more fun to me than watching the Marine tank, where you just have one player say "screw it" and loads up 12 Marines, 12 medevacs worth of Marines and tanks into the main base.
That doesn't happen that often. Blasphemy. Biotank. Biotank is the best.
Okay, I'll let you have your biotank, but for now, I get to enjoy this game. Kelazhu are probably not enjoying losing that base in the bottom left though, because SpeCial has now double expanded up to the top right and is also expanding to the center left. And that does mean that Kelazhu is really, really starting to fall behind in that economy. It's kind of reflected a little bit in the supply.
Move that Liberator over to guard your third, exactly. Oh, gonna bring it with the army. So he's maybe gonna push over to the left. I think you're right to call out the economies. That is going to become an issue very soon. We'll see the income jump. But since they're both maxed out, even if it's a very odd composition, it is similar to Marine Tank versus Marine Tank, where it's like, well, you're both maxed out. Upgrades are actually kind of like question mark in this situation. Like, does it really matter? Well, then it is still anyone's game. Anyone can still take a really atrocious fight by, sending all their Vikings over a bunch of Cyclones.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to end up seeing a bit of a fight over here. Kelazhu gets a lot of lock-ons with his Cyclones, but it's also losing a lot in exchange because his whole army is not together. He finally gets back to a more defensive position. Even got that siege tank, or 2 sieged up over here. Looks like he'll lose out on 1 additional siege tank, and a Liberator also, or 3 Liberators going to one-shot the siege tank.
Kelazhu are never able to really get on SpeCial's side of the map. Has also not really done any harassment. So I would love to see maybe, I know it'd be very risky, but like 6 Cyclones moving over to the left side can lock onto a planetary and kill it. But that would be 6 less Cyclones on the front. So I can understand why he's not feeling it. That does mean that momentum is entirely in SpeCial's favor, despite Kelazhu's tenacity to stand his ground.
I just see a few units on the bottom left-hand side for Kelazhu kind of maneuvering around. Looks like there were Vikings. Love, like you said, kind of just to see a few units trying to plan some harassment. He has 1 Hellion that's actually doing some serious work on the mineral line in the top right, but it does eventually get taken out. And it goes back to just SpeCial being the only one putting on the pressure now.
The Vikings go in favor of SpeCial as he brings them forward, and then Kelazhu is hoping they weren't actually there. Kelazhu's just going to, he's going to run around, man. He's like, okay, I can't take on that fight. So let's try what is, more favorable for his mass Cyclone army right now, which is, it's a kind of base trade, a base for a base at the very least.
I will tell you that there is something that SpeCial's doing that I'm not a huge fan of in this situation, and that's going for battle cruisers. Tell me you disagree, because when I see 20 Cyclones with mag fuel accelerator, I'm not feeling battle cruisers.
Well, I think it's a bit complicated. My God, the amount of SCVs that just went down. And that he's not gonna, I don't know, he might bring 1 forward just to like bring in a Yamato. Well, he doesn't have Yamato, so never mind. I don't know. I think that is the ultimate late game, even against like a bunch of Cyclones. I am kind of with you. It seems a little bit, I don't know, frivolous maybe is the right word. Just adding a battle cruiser.
Yeah. I agree. I think if you had Yamato and you were making 4 battle cruisers at a time, I'd be on board, actually. I think I would be on board with something like that, where you're just doing the chip damage and falling back to the safety to the siege tanks. But, okay, well, he's starting up 2 more battle cruisers. This is the transition he's really trying to get set up into, and I've got to commend him. SpeCial does have pretty good upgrades for those battle cruisers. Not that it helps out a whole lot versus Cyclones, but, well, Kelazhu are finding a lot of these siege tanks before they siege up. Oh, I actually wonder if it would have been better for him to just commit to that.
Yeah, it's a bit questionable. I think he should have just disengaged faster. He's going to jump on top of this planetary, though, and even with less Cyclones, it's still enough to buff that. So that's the power of the Cyclones for sure. 2 bases down, special also with less bank. But the problem is Kelazhu can't really use it. His production's being a little camped here. 1 Battlecruiser did teleport in, and 3 Cyclones need to get those lock-ons to actually finish it off. But Kelazhu's down 30 supply, 40 supply actually, and he can't break through the choke of the siege tanks. Even though his army can take on the Battlecruisers, he can't take on the tanks.
In Zondergaard, there is a magical saying as Kelazhu loses his army out on the map. When you camp a Terran player's production, that is when everything starts going horribly wrong. Kelazhu realizes it.